This video will cover the review and reflect for the topic of log functions and their properties. For the review, we are asked to determine if the function is one-to-one. If the function is one-to-one, then we need to find its inverse, the inverse of f of x. The one way that we have discussed on how to determine if a function is one-to-one is by looking at its graph. So let's first take a look at number 1 that says x is equal to y squared plus 14y plus 49. We can rewrite this in factored form to be y plus 7 squared, and that's our x is equal to. Though we have not discussed many of these problems, what we notice that it looks a lot like y is equal to x plus 7 squared, and this we know is a quadratic equation that is moved 7 units to the left, and it looks like this. But we have x is equal to that. So what we find out is that everything is shifted such that we will go y units down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we will go a parabola going like this. From the graph, we can determine that this is not even a function. It does not pass the vertical line test. So we're going to write down that this is not a function. And let's go to number 2. Here we have x squared is equal to y, or we can say y is equal to x squared. And that's our parent function. So it looks like a quadratic equation that looks like this. However, this is a function, but it does not pass the horizontal line test. So this is actually not one-to-one. So we will not be able to find the inverse of it. For number 3, we have the square root of x is equal to y, or y is equal to the square root of x. Well, we know that that's our parent function that looks like this. It is a function as well as being one-to-one, so we need to go find the inverse. Remember, to find the inverse, the first thing we need to do is decide if it's one-to-one, which it was. Then we're going to switch the x's and y's, so I'm going to have the square root of y is equal to x, and then now I'm solving for y. So I'm going to put a set of parentheses on the left, a set of parentheses on the right, and I'm going to square both sides so that the square root and the square will cancel each other out, and I'll have y is equal to x squared. Well, if we do that, our graph will look like this. But the problem is that remember that we only had one side of it, so we have to decide which side we want. That will give me this graph here. So notice for this one, we know that our domain was from 0 to infinity, and our range was also from 0 to infinity. So when we switch those around, what we want over here is that our domain to be from 0 to infinity. So if that's the case, we actually need to get rid of this part of my graph. For the range, we also want it to be from the 0 to infinity, and we can see that that does happen for this graph. So this is our inverse. Our inverse of our function of f of x will be x squared, but it will also have the domain restriction from 0 to infinity. Now let's turn our attention to the reflect for the page. After the lecture videos, you should be able to determine the value of the log of base 5 of y squared over x if we know the log of base 5 of x and the log of base 5 of y. And that concludes this video.